Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. As everyone is logging in, please feel free to get familiar with the platform. And before we dive in, I do have a few quick housekeeping items I want to address. First, this session is being recorded, and we'll be sending out a copy of that recording after the webinar. With that said, we encourage you to share the recording with any team members that couldn't make it today, and you feel that may benefit from what we'll be discussing. There's also going to be a couple of poll questions that pop up throughout the presentation, and we ask that you please respond as they provide us with important insights. There's also a Q&A chat at the top right hand of your screen, so please feel free to drop questions in there throughout the presentation, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. We'll also have a Q&A at the end as well. If there's additional questions that we don't get to, if you don't feel comfortable asking throughout the presentation, we will be providing our contact information on the last slide. So please feel free to reach out to Verified First and SmartRecruiters after the presentation as well. And then finally, there'll be a brief survey at the end that pops up. This is going to pop up automatically as soon as we end the broadcast. It'll be right there in your browser, and we ask that you please hang on for just an extra minute to provide some valuable feedback for us on whether you thought today's presentation was valuable and what we can do to improve and what you'd like to see from us going forward. All right. So we are going to start off by doing a few introductions. I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Jenny Johnson. I'm the Senior Partner Manager here at Verified First that has the pleasure of managing the SmartRecruiters partnership. With me today, I have Mike Rockwell, who is Vice President of Account Management at Verified First, and Nikki Ladure, who is a Senior Customer Success Manager at SmartRecruiters. Mike and Nikki, do you want to quickly do some introductions?
Yeah, sure. Mike Rockwell, Head of Account Management here at Verified First. I've been in leadership for well over a decade. Background screening is my bread and butter, but my true passion is people, relationships, leadership, and really just overall like building on culture. So I'm excited to be here, excited to chat, and looking forward to sharing some of my knowledge. Off to you, Nikki.
Yes, yeah. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all virtually. I manage our North American region and our APAC region for SmartRecruiters in our customer success area. So customers are my passion. Love helping them achieve success with our platform and be aligned with their objectives. That's really what our team does day in and day out. Prior to joining SmartRecruiters, I was in TA operations and worked for an RPO. So from that perspective, I know what it's like to sit and try to just get a hire through the process as quickly as possible and ensure that you get the people you need when you need them. So excited to talk with everyone today.
Thank you both. Let's go ahead and take a look at our agenda. So today we're going to start with talking about how retaining top talent starts with hiring and how retention is the strategic advantage that you're going to gain by implementing a strong recruitment and onboarding process. Then we'll move into how hiring managers have a huge impact on retention rates and how hiring processes can be improved significantly through data and technology. And finally, we'll chat about how a better candidate experience results in better retention rates and long-term employee engagement. Before we wrap up, as I mentioned, we will have a quick Q&A if time allows, so that we can answer any of those questions you guys put in the Q&A section. All right. So before we dive into retention, we'd like to launch a quick poll to gain some audience insights into which area of your current recruitment process you feel you could be improved the most. So the poll question will pop up in just a moment, and we encourage you to select as many options as apply to you and your organization. And there's no right or wrong answers, so your feedback is going to help provide us with important insights that will help guide our discussion today. So we'll give that a minute for you guys to go ahead and answer that poll. Give it just a few more seconds. All right. We've got several responses so far. All right, appreciate that. All right. So let me get to the next screen. So to kick things off, let's talk about why we're here today. This conversation goes beyond just finding great candidates. It's also about keeping them. And to walk us through why retention starts long before day one, I'd like to turn it over to Mike and Nikki.
Thanks, Jenny. You can go to the next slide.
Yes, sir.
Retention is a strategic advantage. What does that mean? There's a lot of different phases to this, but the most important thing I think to take away from this slide is getting the right people in the door is important, right? You're spending a lot of time, you're spending a lot of resources trying to find the individual or the individuals that match your culture, they match what you're looking for, and almost just as important, you match what they're looking for as well, right? And the thing about great candidates is there's almost like a war for these folks, right? Like the best and brightest, the cream of the crop. Everyone else is trying to hire these guys too. So first impression right out of the gate, your recruitment process, how you're interviewing, how the application process works, even nuanced things, right? With how you're following up, how quickly that happens. All of those things kind of shape how those candidates view your company. And if those things seem wonky, if they're not streamlined, if they don't seem authentic and genuine, right, and have a little bit of a human touch to it, it's really, really easy for candidates to be almost a little bit turned off. And what's really unfortunate is if you spend a lot of time interviewing and trying to get the right person and they back out of the process, or even worse, they start and they're here for a few months and you gotta let them go. There's so much money, energy, resources, and culture on the table. It's just really, really important that you're cognizant of the process all the way from start to finish. The theme of this is first impressions just don't start the minute they're in the door. They start the minute they actually start interacting with your company right out of the gate. We're going to cover a lot of the things you can do today to sort of empower yourself and maybe be a little bit smarter with tools and automation and really just human engagement to kind of tackle some of that. Before I move on to the next slide, anything to add, Nikki?
Yeah, I think your people really are your controllable competitive advantage, which speaks to everything that you're talking about there, right? So that candidate experience, even if it starts at a nurture stage, is so important. So even before they apply, right? What is the candidate behavior that's happening before that impression starts when they start looking at your company or start talking to their friends or start talking to referrals, those sorts of things. So all of those things are really important. And I think prioritizing the key milestones in that journey, as you would think of like a customer journey, prioritizing those key milestones in your candidate journey are really important to make sure you hit those marks as you're intending to, and really viewing yourself as kind of that candidate. How is this experience, if I were the candidate, how is this experience on a front line as a candidate, those sorts of things. And you could want different experiences for each type of those candidates, which I think is also a really important point, right? I don't think the experience should be the same if you're in a distribution center as it might be for a senior manager in a corporate environment, right? Those should be two different interview and selection and hiring experiences. So I can't agree with you enough, Michael. I really think it's that first impression is really indicative of what it's going to be like to work at that organization. So you kind of get one chance, especially if you're competing for highly scarce talent
Yep, yep.
or high volume where first the candidate wins, right? So it's important in all different types of hiring as well.
Well said. Jenny, I think we can move on to the next
Yeah.
slide. The role of hiring managers in retention. Move on to one more slide. These title slides always seem kind of weird because you're kind of like leading into something else we're already gonna talk about. We got to pause to just read the slides. So, um, Managers, they do more than just hiring. I like the words on the slide, but I'm going to expound quite a bit because that's what I do. They align hiring with business needs and employee goals. I love this so much, actually. As a manager, as a company, when you're bringing someone in the door, it's easy to get caught in this mindset, right? Of filling the seat, matching the skills, making sure you've got the right person. And it sometimes is very difficult to sit back and ask yourself the question, are you also aligning with their goals, right? Are you the best spot for them? And when those things don't match up, when A doesn't match with B, you get a great talent in the door, but your culture and your sort of company and values or even their career goals don't align with what you're doing. So difficult to keep that employee long term because they're going to figure out really quickly that this isn't the place for them. There's a line we have here in some of our notes. I'm just going to read it out because I love it. It says, great hiring decisions should never happen in a vacuum, right? Great managers are aligning talent choices with the business needs, the employee needs, and they're looking just beyond the role and they're thinking about the future, right? Long-term objectives for both the employee, long-term objectives for the company. And the ultimate like sort of sad thing here is if you make a poor hiring decision, you're losing out on a lot of money, especially if that person's already been in the door for a few months. The actual cost of retraining, having to source someone new, the money you've spent, the investment, and those are all just tangible things. What about the intangible things, right? Like the team dynamics, the morale impact. If someone's in the wrong seat, like how does that domino out, right, into the rest of the team? So it's just really important, like you get it right off the bat. Invest, research, make sure that what you're matching for matches your employee as well and you're making some really smart decisions with a lot of feedback. I'll give you guys one tip. If there's any hiring managers on the call today, I do this really unorthodox thing. Before I let anyone even move on to like the third phase of any type of interview round, I actually have them interview with people on the team as well that are sitting in the same seats. It's so important to me that they get to see the culture, that they get to see the team, and they get to learn about the day to day. It's just really such a new dynamic sort of cheat mode way to figure out if someone's going to vibe with the team, if that makes sense.
It's
Um,
kind of like a reference process, right?
you got
Like
it.
a candidate reference, right? You, instead of you referencing the candidate, they're referencing you as a hiring manager, which can be scary to some hiring managers that maybe don't do hiring well. But I actually love that idea, right? Like, don't just take my word for it. Like, talk to my team, see what it's like to be on our team, those sorts of things. Because honestly, as a candidate, I'd want to know what I'm stepping into. And if I put that candidate hat on, what does it look like as a candidate? That to me is going to be really impactful. Like, is this a cool team? Is this not a cool team? Where do I think I fit on this team? And such. So I love that. It's kind of a reverse reference if you think about it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that description.
It's a
Um,
pretty neat experience. And I think it's one that um, the like you don't think of all the time to apply. And I think really if you're open and honest and you trust your culture, that says a lot about you that you're willing to open that conversation up with the team that you're going to be working with day in and day out. It's kind of like dating, right? It's a
oh
quick way
yeah,
to speed date and speed up that process if you connect them. Like you can sort of
yeah.
understand, is this going to be a good thing? No, okay, great. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it.
Right. Super great analogy because I mean, at the core, no matter how we frame this, spin it, talk about it, it's a relationship. I mean, that's really what it is. So, what a great reference to that. All right, Jenny, I think we can go on to the next slide. Oh, here's another one of these title slides. Smart
I
hiring
know, I'm
decisions.
shifting gears a little
Data,
bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
Uh, data-driven hiring equals better retention. There's so many cool ways you can do this. When you're looking at things like turnover rate, how long it takes to get someone in the door, how on average are people performing, what's your average attrition rate? Those things can really help you dive in and figure out what's working and what's not. Um, the other cool thing is when you're using data, it can help you reduce bias. I used to, when I first learned about this term of bias in hiring, this was years ago, I actually sort of felt almost like called out a little bit. And there's this whole like idea of unconscious bias. Like no matter how great you are as a leader, no matter how aware you are of who you are, we all have, whether we realize it or not, some type of unconscious biasness And it took me a really long time to figure out what that meant and how it applied to me and what I can do about it. Data gets in the way of that in every single way. You can see what works, you can see what doesn't. You have standard processes, you have ways that you score the interviews, and you have a really consistent way just to evaluate your candidates, right? I would say again, I'm going to harp back on this. It's got to go the other way too, right? You've got to give the employee the ability to sort of, or the potential employee the ability to sort of evaluate you, right, in a consistent way. Also, it's really easy, I think, as leaders sometimes, especially if you have a great interview, to jump in on gut feeling, or if you have a bad interview, do the same thing as well. And that's not always indicative of who that person is or how valuable they'll be to your team. Um, there's some really cool stuff out there you can look into. It's things like predictive hiring, right? When you're looking about who's been successful, you can see who's not been successful. You can figure out the best type of candidate that works for you. And you can also do things like track the quality of hire. You can just see what's working, what's not, constant improvement. If anyone's familiar with that mean cycle, that's kind of part of what this is. You're just constantly looking for one thing you can do just a little bit better. And you can apply that to hiring processes as well. You can apply it to the way you do interviews. You can apply it to the way people onboard. There's so
Yeah.
many different ways you can do this, and there's so many fantastic tools out there to help you with that. Automation is going to become king. I might be jumping the gun here, but the key to all of this is making sure that the human element still stays at play as well. And it doesn't become too formulaic or too robotic or too out of touch. But automation is going to reshape, and it's continuing to reshape even today.
I think it's important the inputs though that automation takes into account, right? So garbage in is garbage out. Your automation's not going to be very effective if you don't have the good data to start with. And that starts at the beginning of your hiring process and even before the top of your funnel. In most cases, where are you getting your candidates from? What sources lead to the best hires? What sources lead to hires? Sometimes that's a data rabbit hole that you need to go down. But I do think the being able to quantify where your talent comes from, what type of talent comes from where are your best performing sources, can not only lead to better quality of hire, but can also lead to better decision making later on in the process, right? So
Mm.
if you're going to try to move a candidate forward through an automation step in your hiring process, you better be really sure that all of the criteria is there appropriately and that you're not introducing bias by
Yeah.
trying to move something along and move a candidate along quickly, right? So I think a lot of organizations are trying to reduce some of that inherent bias or unconscious bias through skills, right? Skills seem to be a language that offer less bias in that way. So I think matching candidate skills to the job are really going to become very crucial. However, going back to garbage in, garbage out, if you don't have a good job description, you don't have good requirements, how are you going to determine if you have a good match, and how are you going
Right.
to determine if that's the right fit for your organization? So I think during the hiring process you can do a certain amount of automation based on what the inputs are, based on what the candidate inputs, based on what you input into the intake form, your intake discussions, your job descriptions. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go proof point that, because you may get a bad match that could be very successful in your organization. They just didn't match on paper, right? And I think when you design automations, whether it's in a system or it's above the system that is automation overall, you have to be conscious about what the inputs are that you're then trying to create that automation from, because I think that's a key piece in that leads to destructive automation
Right.
or bias, because you're basing it on something that are maybe not great inputs.
Well freaking said. I love that. I haven't heard the garbage in, garbage out phrase recently, and thank you for the reminder. It's so important, so important. Um, Speaking of automation, oh,
Yes,
this is not the same slide I have. Something has changed.
something's
Um,
changed.
Automation enhances the human touch. Um, think about it this way, guys. Automation doesn't need to take away from the human experience. How many things you have to do in the hiring process that are just busy, monotonous work that doesn't require thought? Things like scheduling interviews, sending reminders to candidates, having to answer questions that you're going to ask anyways to every single candidate. Finding ways to automate that stuff, it makes life so much easier. And then you as a hiring manager, or if you're not a hiring manager, your hiring managers that work with you, they're going to have more time to have the really deep, important value add conversations that matter. And they're not spending 20, 30% of their time trying to find times, arranging calls, getting availability from the candidate, answering the 5 same culture questions that you're going to get answers to. If you automated or had them do it through a form of some sort, it gives you a ton of time back to really just focus on the things that matter. And again, I just want to point out, if you're using the right type of tool, if you have the right type of automation in place, it makes you better. And if the candidate and the human experience is sort of like front and center, everything's good all around. Think about this, even on the candidate side, how difficult is it to go back and forth trying to schedule an interview and manage your existing life with family, with your current job? If you had tools that could just do that automatically, you don't have to talk to anyone. I do that in my
That
personal
was
life.
my least favorite part of being a recruiter. I hated the interview scheduling piece. It took so much time and it was multiple time zones. It was my least favorite part of the recruitment cycle. But I agree, like, the human touch is a really important one. And I think a lot of teams are very concerned that AI is either going to take their job or that it's going to remove the human touch and you're going to have that robot there, right? You can see here Winston, who is our friendly hiring companion at SmartRecruiters. He is not meant to take or replace really anyone's job, but to allow you to do the things that actually mean a lot to a candidate, mean a lot to the business, mean a lot to the hiring teams. We really view those 3 things as being crucial to that candidate experience. And you can see Winston is not necessarily your traditional looking robot either. He is waving hi and trying to build a relationship with you and trying to start that hello conversation that you might want to try and start in a traditional relationship. So I think there are going to be parts that the candidate doesn't care if it has a human touch to it or not, like a scheduling instance, right? If they encounter a problem, they probably want a human touch. But for most of it, they want to just click a button and say when I'm available. That doesn't necessarily need the human touch, but you probably need a human touch on your interviews. And you need a human touch on what the hiring manager needs for that particular round of that particular hire, right? And those are the things that you could spend your time on. Thoughtfully sourcing is another big one, right? And making sure you help keep the business compliant and out of risk. And I think all of those things sometimes take a back seat to the tactical nitty gritty of what has to get done to get to the next step, instead of really getting back to what recruiting should be, which is that human touch and that relationship building effort that you have. So you can see here, Winston is really meant to bring a touch of joy to the hiring process. It's not meant to be a takeover or anything along those lines. Winston really is that AI companion that's going to help hiring teams, whether it be a recruiter or it'd be a hiring manager, depending on what type of hiring you do, that's going to anticipate, automate, and bring a touch of joy to that hiring process. So that's a little bit about Winston, a sneak peek. That's really where SmartRecruiters is headed and such. But I thought it resonates here in our conversation around automation and AI. So.
I love the joy piece. No hyperbole or anything. Legitimately smiled when I saw this slide. Like, he just looks so happy and friendly and energy. Like, yeah, very well described.
Yes, yeah, it's exciting things are happening. I won't go into a lot of detail. We can talk about that at a different time. But really, I think it's that next level of what it means to have a tool that helps you recruit smart, but also helps bring that human touch and allows you to focus on the things that really matter. I remember as a recruiter, I would spend so much of my time doing a lot of the things that had to get done, but it really wasn't the part of the recruiting process that I liked, which was finding candidates, being a detective. What kind of skills can I find in what market? And how do I match what the hiring manager needs to what the available talent is, right? And how do I fit them in this puzzle that is recruiting? And so I think, for those that are inspired by that, that is really what I think recruiting will go back to, and um, we'll get to that place again, and probably take it to another level that I can't even begin to think about at this point. But yes, it's an exciting time.
All right.
All right, Jenny, I think you can move on to the next
All
slide.
right, yes. So we are going to pause again for another quick poll. Since we just covered some data and technology tips for retaining talent, we're curious to know if any of you are currently looking to adopt or to replace any of these areas of technology we have listed here. The poll is going to pop up in just a minute. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, so choose as many options that apply. We'll give it about 20 more seconds. All right. Okay, so now that we've looked at how hiring managers and technology play a strategic role in smarter hiring, let's talk about something equally important, the candidate experience. So because no matter how great your tools and processes are, if the candidates walk away feeling undervalued, disconnected, or confused, you've already started off on the wrong foot. All right. So Mike, I'm going to let you speak to this one.
Fantastic. I was just speaking on mute. Apologies, everyone. Exceptional candidate experience drives long-term loyalty. I feel like we've talked about different flavors of this ever since the very beginning of this presentation, panel, whatever we want to call it. But that candidate experience, that's sort of the buffer. It's sort of the map. It's sort of the standard of what that employee is going to feel like when they're at your company, especially if you've taken the time to match the right candidate to the right seat to the right company. It's really important you set the tone early. As you're talking to people, as you're getting them in the door, as they're learning more about who you are, treat them like a future team member, right? If they're coming into the interview process and there's no enthusiasm and there's no energy, people pick up on that stuff really easy. Even if you're having a bad day, right? Like they'll pick up on that, and it's just going to really set them off in terms of feeling comfortable and wanted and moving forward in the process. That positivity and that energy has to be there. I cannot understate how important it is to communicate consistently. There was nothing more frustrating for me back when I was job hunting back in the day, than when I would apply somewhere or someone would say, hey, we'd like to talk to you. And then I wouldn't hear anything for weeks. Even worse, once you're in the middle of the hiring process, you have your interview, you don't hear back for a week and a half, and you're constantly sort of like wondering what's next. And I just want to like really harp in on the fact that these are human lives, right? A lot of these people, they might need this job. They could be in a situation where they have to move to a new company, and while they're talking to you and going through this process, there's a lot of anxiety, right? It doesn't just play into the recruiting and the hiring process either. It also plays into things like background screening too. They're anxiously waiting for these things to be done, and if you're not communicating, these guys are sitting here wondering what's going on. Am I going to get this job? What's happening with my future? Communication is so vitally important. I'll go and say again, that's where something like that Winston tool with automation can help, right? These are the things you can have automated. Hey, we're working on this. Here's your next step. This is what your
Yes.
timeline looks like. And at the end of the day, right, embrace the future. The candidate experience doesn't end at the offer letter. Once these folks are in the door, once they're part of the team, invest, 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 invest. You hear the phrase all the time, culture is king. It really, really, really is. if your culture is great and it's embracing of the human part of your business, and you're investing, empowering, and inspiring, and giving people the opportunity that you work with and work for to actually grow and feel like they're part of something, man, those are the types of people that are going to give back 150% because they feel like they matter.
Yeah, I would
I think
agree. I think that's I think you get more than your return if you spend time and you focus on these areas, right? We talked about first impressions, but I also think they think back to what their candidate experience was. Maybe they are also consumers of your brand, right? For service organizations, if you have a bad candidate experience, sometimes you might not stay at the hotel that you're interviewing for, right? And so that you lose a customer too, which I think is really important in setting that candidate experience. I do think technology can help when it comes to that communication in multi-channel ways that it would take a while or would take more time for an individual to do without technology. So if you think, generally candidates don't read emails anymore, and you need to get to them via SMS or text or WhatsApp, or depending on the region that you're recruiting in. But if you don't have some of those capabilities inherent, your teams are doing them outside of the system, and which introduces risk. So, or you may not be doing them at all. And so I really think the channels that you communicate shouldn't be undervalued either. Like, you should really put a focus on what resonates best and what hiring market am I working in, and what type of hiring am I trying to hire, right? So if you're still sending emails to frontline workers, you're missing out on your candidates. Somebody else has beat you to the punch. And probably communicated via text, and there they are, right? And so I think it's really important that you consider not only the expectations that you're setting and driving for future steps in the process as part of that initial tone and that initial expectation setting, but then you consistently have regular communications with them as well, as you can see here. So I think it's any one of these can drag that candidate experience down, and sometimes lose you a customer as well if you're in that type of hiring environment.
well said, Nikki.
Right. So as we explore improving the candidate experience and strategies to increase retention, it's also important to remember that there are other elements of the hiring process that remain non-negotiable. So even in today's increasingly automated world, personalized background screening, verifications, and drug testing are still the foundation of a safe and qualified workforce. Background checks go far beyond what's listed on a resume. You want to uncover critical information about the candidate's history that can directly impact your company's safety, culture, and reputation. And while automation can accelerate certain processes, these human-centered services are key to making informed, confident decisions about who you bring on board. The trust and integrity of these services are essential to building a workforce that's not only fits the job, but also aligns to your company's values and standards. I think we are now going to go ahead and open it up to our Q&A. So I know we've covered a lot of information during today's event, and I'm sure many of you have questions. So we're going to pause right now and do a quick Q&A. And just as a reminder, there is a Q&A in the top right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to drop any questions in there, and we will get answer as many of those as we can. Let's see.
Maybe until
yes,
we have
you will. Yeah, I do see one. One was asking if they'll have access to the slides. So yes, we will definitely be able to provide, be sending out a copy of the presentation after today's webinar. And we just got a nice compliment. Thank you for the good information. So you guys are doing a great job.
I was just going to say, maybe we could talk a little bit how SmartRecruiters and Verified First are integrated and kind of our philosophy together. We mentioned it on that last slide, but I think, SmartRecruiters has, like with the hiring happening in SmartRecruiters, Verified First is one of our marketplace partners that makes it really easy to integrate results or ordering of assessments or background checks or any of the components that Verified First does um, as part of the natural hiring process, and can even like automate that so that there doesn't have to be a hiring manager pressing a button if you don't want them to order it and getting the results back. I think the same way we talked about communicating constantly and consistently with candidates, it's also important that your hiring managers have that similar experience, right? So they aren't coming to the recruiters and saying, where's my candidate? Are they through background? You can see that on the candidate's profile. Like there's certain benefits to being able to have this close relationship that we have together that enables streamlined communication. It improves the hiring manager experience as well, because all of that is together and integrated fairly easily in most situations.
Yeah, yeah, it's super
Well
smooth.
said.
It works pretty seamlessly. Doesn't require a lot of effort. And the cool thing is getting to work with a partner like Smart Recruiters. Like we're both very innovative. We're both very forward thinking. And the great thing to know is in the realm of our partnership is our mutual customers are giving us feedback on things they'd like to see, changes, advancements, enhancements. Those are the kind of things that sort of drive us to do more with each other and just be better as service providers for you all. So the partnership's amazing. We love what we're doing with you guys. And yeah, if you want to learn more, just let us know. We're happy to share.
All right. And as we shared, we will have be sharing the deck, but wanted to go ahead and just pop up our contact information. And before we say goodbye, we want to thank everyone for joining us today and remind you to please stick around for just about 1 minute after this presentation to complete that brief survey that's going to pop up automatically in your browser. We're just going to ask a few questions that will really help us make our presentations more valuable for you and providing the information you want to see in the future. And again, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. We want to say thank you to everyone. I'd like to say thank you to Mike and Nikki very much for joining today. Appreciate it. And we hope that everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Jenny.